topic is supply chain reimagination, and my guest is Sumit Dutta. He is partner and leader of the Americas supply chain market with EY. Sumit, hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you for being with me. So this whole topic of supply chain reimagination, let's divide it into two broad themes. Let's start with this whole idea of supply chain redesign and architecture. How does one even begin to approach that? How do you begin to design a supply chain? Because in the past, supply chains just sort of fell together naturally. Now we're talking about better planning and better thought. Tell me about how you address that issue even to start.
Sure. I'm happy to. So as you rightly said, Bob, supply chains have evolved almost organically and one step at a time over the last 30 years. The one theme, though, I would say that happened over the last, since 1990 almost, was a global supply chains that have been designed for efficiency, cost efficiency, and a very linear supply chain. You almost assume that things could flow across the world globally. I think many of those assumptions have been challenged right now, and hence, as we talk to clients, as we work with the clients to help them redesign the supply chain, we are talking about it in 4 parts. Start with saying, what is your corporate strategic objectives? And flowing out from that, what are the supply chain imperatives? It is a phrase that I use commonly nowadays to say supply chain is a new strategy. Supply chain is actually enabling corporate strategy, but start from the top out there. Once we understand that, what are the imperatives for supply chain, whether it's resiliency, whether it's cost, whether it's agility or sustainability? There are different criteria for different organizations. The next step that we then help clients is on architecture. And when I talk about supply chain architecture, we start by first looking at what is your overall product portfolio? Do you need to simplify your product portfolio itself? Then what is your coming out from that, hence, is what is the right footprint for your plants, for where you buy, and where are you going to distribute it out to? Once we've got the architecture nailed completely, right? Then we come to the operating model. And right now we see clients, especially with global supply chains, struggling between what is the right level of centralization versus centralization and standardization versus localization and allowing a level of autonomy to it. So what is your right level of operating model, which has the right level of people and process behind it? But equally then, how do you enable that operating model with the right digital enablers? So that...
Well, let me stop you for a moment and back up for a moment, because you're talking about those criteria.
Yes.
And balancing them and deciding what's important. But it almost occurs to me that it's kind of an all of the above kind of thing. Of course you want cost control. Of course you want resilience. Of course you want the best deal you can get from a supplier, and yet to diversify the supplier too. So isn't it a question of having to address all those things at once? And that's very challenging.
It is. That's a great question. And that is actually what we are seeing in the industry now, or what we help clients with. So even 10 years back, or even 7-8 years back, we would look at one criteria at a time. And we would say, let's first design, let's understand what is your supply chain service promise. And then we design the most cost-efficient supply chain around that. That was the model of supply chain design. What we now realize is that you have to look at all of those variables together. So you're looking at cost, but equally at the same time, you have to look at your availability. And this is where we're saying it's not just like one global supply chain. You can have 3 different supply chains. You can have an Asia for Asia. You have a transatlantic. You have a nearshoring and all of that, right? So you have different forms of supply chains that are coming in together. And then you throw in sustainability, which you can no longer look at as an afterthought and say, after I've designed everything, what is my sustainability metrics? You can't do that. So as we design supply chains, we're actually considering all those variables now. What do you need on cost? What is your service promise? How much agility do you need to embed in your supply chain to start with? And what do you need to do right from the start so that you are hitting your sustainability goals for 2030?
Okay, so all those considerations roll into this idea of the so-called end-to-end supply chain.
Yes.
Now, this is a phrase that we've been hearing for decades.
Yes.
And yet maybe now it's a reality or close to becoming a reality. Why is it now possible to create a true end-to-end supply chain without interruptions, totally integrated, flowing smoothly, when it wasn't before?
Again, a great question. I would say there are two things that have where the industry and our clients, we see industry at a tipping point. One, For the longest time, most organizations were still working on perfecting themselves in their individual functional silos. So you had to get better in planning. S&OP, IBP. S&OP is something that industry started only 20 years back.
Sales and operations planning.
Sales and operations planning, right? Or integrated business planning on IBP, for example. So most clients, even today, still are trying to get to the next level of perfection within functional silos, whether it's planning with S&OP, IBP, or you take manufacturing and getting the right level of processes down there, etc. What we are seeing is industry has now moved to a sufficient level of specialization and excellence around each functions, and hence discovering that the next level of value is at the interface between different functions.
So now we can start putting the pieces together.
Now it's almost a necessity. You can only extract so much efficiency from just manufacturing alone. And you realize that the value in manufacturing is based on what you are planning upfront or what your product portfolio is. So the wastes in manufacturing are actually not coming from within the plants, they're actually coming from what has been created upstream. So there's one reason why industry is actually looking at truly end-to-end, or can look at end-to-end. The other big reason I would say is, digital, which digital is now actually allowing you to see across the boundaries of the organization itself. Where now someone in manufacturing can actually look at how much inventory do I have upstream? What is my supplier's on-time performance? How do I plan according to that? So the whole data connectivity, data lakes that organizations have implemented, end-to-end planning systems. There are so many solutions out there which allow you to plan across different functional silos. So I think the evolution in technology, digital, and data now actually allows organizations to see across their organization boundaries. So for me, it's those two, right? One, it was a matter of necessity. To keep extracting value, you had to look at the interface between different functions. And two, that you can actually do that now because of the evolution on technology and digital side.
So again, this word digitization, another word that seems very vague in meaning sometimes, it actually is something very specific. It sounds like it's all about automating the data flow between partners and within companies. Would that be a good definition, or maybe you can give me a better one?
It is that and more. I would say that the highest level, the way I see it and the way we talk to clients is how can you make better decisions with having all the data at your fingertips and being able to connect across the organization in a much more seamless, in a much more interactive workflow manner than what was earlier. So again, going back to the functional specialization, there is a lot of digitization that happens, or digital supply chain that happens within each functions. So if I take planning, sales and operations planning at S&OP is a basic process step. It went forward to the next step from that to saying, listen, can I actually automate the whole planning control towers, where you have data available at fingertips and cross-functional team that can take decisions and so on. And now you actually have predictive tools, which can tell you exactly how much inventory should you have based on the data that you have available in terms of your demand patterns and so on. You take the same thing in manufacturing. You're moving from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance. So those are examples of digital within each functions. The next step to that, again, going back to the end-to-end, which clients are now saying is, if I can actually see within my manufacturing plants and lines, and I can plan across my SKUs, can I connect these different digital systems together? So can my manufacturing war room actually connect to, or a manufacturing control tower, can it actually connect to the planning control tower? So once again, you raise the level of decision making that organizations are able to do.
Okay, so there's actual hope that the so-called end-to-end supply chain might be a true reality. That we can truly reimagine a supply chain that might not have actually been imagined in the first place. But thank you so much, Sumit, for helping us to understand how there's some real promise in the technology and business process change that will enable these things to go forward. Thanks very much for being with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. Great to connect with you.
I've been speaking with Sumit Dutta of EY. Thank you very much for watching.